좀 코알로트에게 타도에게 삼바께 발라다 강래게 코알 코사기 네디기 디균시 통제 디균 통균디 통화자 균디레 타도에게 삼바께 오래 되네 자랑은 저기 녀와게 녀 함주피에서 되지마 도시니 수디기 도시나하고 같이 자다 되네자 네텔이야 제반에다 되네 동안 용고 그래서 될 동안에 타고 구두 선배기다 될 마탄다 탑민데 될 탈비게 탈 탑디 냠는 제고도 제자데 도시네 삼다야다 제자들에게 델레 타야기 귀디 가르스네 냐마 귤스타바 사마 주바체 냐마 사셔베네 님부터 쉬고네 봐 장바이나 네 코와 나소리야 냐별 마지지 동안 용고 말해서베 도시네 니서 하고 바친 델레 타르게 삼바기 델레 타르게 탑라디 먼저 냠는 제고 그래서 비슷시고 그래서 가상 것들 도시네 쉬바데.
Good morning. So we're continuing in our presentation whereby we're looking at the faults of samsara and specifically at those of the lower realms. And the very purpose of this presentation is to come to see ever more clearly the sufferings of samsara and the potential sufferings that await us. And the purpose of this is to develop a deep determination to identify the causes that would lead to such a suffering result and to strive in the method to gain freedom. In particular, as mentioned last night, to develop the determination to engage in extensive purification and as a purification of past misdeeds through the four opponent powers, and to have a stable determination not to accumulate anew misdeeds.
아니네 자다 저기 녀마 강하다 동아 중 사교디게래나 제스카야 말하다 마음바나 중규를 지기 용규이네 다장 안 소리야 디마야게 탑시시하게 탑람제를 고급시여 봐인자 다장 안 저기 된 원dio 고방도 된 개발전디 디된이라 아주게 간스 탑람 주가는 줍투에긴 된 개발전의 여래 되는 남주게 셰럽자 여봐인자 안 마음바나 되니기 니수이 예비 디기네디게 하고 와제 델리아다 마케기 탑람 안델레 타야게 탑람 다되는 거지 고갑이야 여버리 고갑 여바나진 저기 탑 디냠는 제바나 델레 마기야 탑람 차상지 투여 바인자 땅어 저기 도시네 예비 내다디 마 내서 하고 와제 대자데 델리암 냠는 집에서 제고 바데 김제로지다 이 고시에 고비게다 김제로 뒤로와
In this process of purification and restraint, it's important that one does to oneself sincerely regret past misdeeds. This is an indispensable part of the process of purification. But then one lets go. When one has generated sincere regret and the promise not to made the commitment not to engage in such activities again, and engage in the process of purification, then let go. Don't dwell on past misdeeds. Don't let them eat you up from inside. What is done is done. What is important now is to take responsibility for our mind in the present, and to do so consistently so that our future is thereby changed. This is what's important. Dwelling on past misdeeds serves no positive purpose. Purify, regret, purify, and let go. Moreover, through the meditations one has been doing on recognizing the incredible opportunity we have, having achieved a precious human rebirth, having encountered the Dharma, having faith in the Dharma, and so forth, recognize that we have an incredible opportunity to radically change the projection of our future rebirths, and to strive at that. Any dwelling on past misdeeds, things we've done or been done to us, dwelling on that just holds us back. Rather use our wisdom, recognize where we are, what capacity we have, and strive by transforming our mind now to transform our future. So we'll continue now from where we concluded last night, with looking at the presentation on contemplating the suffering of animals in the middle of page 96 in the published book, and in the handouts on the middle of page 111.
Dudu nam tu chewe chungwa sueba dang lame yuju de gyude rangwa mejing xiangwang do gyue sueba dang deba dang neba che la la dang mi lame dang lenju do gyue ne shen meba se ngo shir she des.
The weaker animals are killed by more powerful ones. Having become the chattel of gods and humans, they are not under their own control, but under the control of others and lack freedom, which is why they are killed, beaten, and harmed. Levels of yogic practice explains that since they occupy the same territory as humans and gods, they have no other place to stay.
Nido nganzuki da dunrugi kangadi di nganzuki ji mangboji nganzuki da tongde bas nyamyo da tongde bas chagorwa.
When it comes to contemplating the sufferings of animals, here at least we have observed directly what they have to endure.
Nada dunru dile karasun tu chewegi an chungwa sueba da sa de nganzuki da di tongdo barwa simje jike che tu neba che di nu tu che se neba che was. Neba che su bu che chung ga ya ma da neba che di ge chungwa le sueba nyam chungwa di pa sue ne na jike simje koran su jik pa sue ya da de ne go koran su kala che lu sue sa da di sueba de yung gu wa de sueba da sa ji de de ne la mi yu ji du gu ba sa de je sa da nga su simje mang bu ji ga ju gi mi yu ji che go ra da nga su lia go gu sa an ji ti sa ne ji ge de ben ro da be xue da sa wo ma da xia da an cha da ba ba da cha sang du xin be xue da sa da lia go gu sa da an nga ji ge chong gyap sa ru chong zo ro ji o du xian an ji mi yu ji du gu wa re an ji na xin da yang sim je dun zhuo mang bu ji nga ji mi be xue da ma de la hu rong ji ge la gi他这个样子讲就米别些大王拿些黄水也都是呢，别些大家吃过，这咱米他们有些都给我，这咱看到了让我有嘛嘞，看到了让我面前向往的给我，他向往的没向往的给些，等你水把的，第二把的，你把这把用过来，改变水呀，等你都大呀，等你个怎么这的你把这绿呀，你把这都是刚刚这样的用过来这，这种就问我同学是有把差点了吧。
So through our own observations, what is presented here, we know that it is valid. So when you see in the first line, the weaker animals are killed by more powerful ones, this we see. Here size isn't the main criteria, but it's the power of, or the capacity of the individual animal that enables them to kill others. And usually it's done for food, sometimes for pleasure, but in general it's just done to eat them. And this we see. One animal that has the capacity to kill another, all too often will. But the suffering animals encounter is not just from each other, but we also from humans. And in the second sentence, having become the chattel of gods and humans, they are not under their own control, but under the control of others, and therefore lack freedom. So we value freedom so. This is something that we all prize and seek. But animals have no freedom to be spoken of. Even if they are in the wild, they're in constant danger. That's hardly a state of freedom. And those who are enslaved by human beings, they are slaves because they are seen as possessions. They have no freedom. They are used as implements of labor. And not only implements of labor, but as an actual source of direct revenue through the sale of their body and their body parts. The sentence continues, which is why they are killed, beaten, and harmed. So again, this we know all too well. The dairy we consume, the meat we enjoy, the leather that we wear, the fur that we wear, this is from the bodies of animals. This is how they are traded. They are raised as a commodity They are seen as primarily a possession to sustain ourselves, to make our lives more comfortable. This is their actual situation, and they have no freedom to do anything about it.
And then Henji to give a shen me by saying what she that is not your setting of the me you set down, and then how you say it, my Chibaro, Lucian, you dear mother, near Hada, me mess a shanda, near shanda medes, and then Yawa said that either near set is really nearly do not me about water. That's what I think of the said.
Then Lama Tsongkhapa, the next sentence, presents where they reside. So according to the levels of yogic practice, that since they occupy the same territory as humans and gods, they have no other place to stay.
And in this way, Kawa Yores in that in Ma, Didagi, Negi, Sawan, Yasuchin Bodan, Yenamni, Dilun, Treba Yimber, Jujile Shadows.
Lama Tsongkhapa continues. The Treasury of Abhidharma auto-commentary explains that their primary abode is the vast ocean and that other species evolved from there.
지변의 용용주 차대로 제가 디네서 자와도 자소리에서 아니 셴 남니스르다 델레 셴 사강을 유디게 디네서 셴다 사강을 유다 바나강을 두신에 되게 델레게 최바 임베 델레도스 뉴아 델레 최네 마 뉴아를 마도 말해서 저제나네 두신 송요래 제래.
So this is something that is largely still true today, that the vast number of animals abide in the ocean. The number of fish, as well as other life forms in the ocean, is immense. It's certainly incalculable. And they're from the oceans in ancient times. Then animals progressed from living underwater to living on land and in the air.
dine yang sumba dang chu ge xin de da do ge de chi wa dang ku ri ji wa ji we nga wa dang mo wa dang ane bu zhe ba dang ane da ba dang su lu ge mi zhe wa du me nyam da ba je de sue ba dang zhe gom da ni la ge si wa dang ngom ba so ge go du ma ne zhe we de da la du nam yang ane du nam yang ji yi rebe dungawi ge chu nam samde gyeojian yi jung er jiao sa.
Then Lama Tsongkhapa continues, but just before I read, here the translation needs to be changed slightly, so that it starts with the word moreover, because otherwise it looks like the first sentence I'm about to read is connected to the previous one. Whereas here, a section to the end, or to this paragraph, the sentence that ends with terrified, this is a section that lists the sufferings of animals. So otherwise the first sentence looks like it connects to the previous one, when it's now a start of a different section. Moreover, they are born in darkness, in the water, and there they age and die. Worn out by heavy burdens, they are put to the plough, shorn and driven, and killed miserably by many different methods of slaughter. They are tormented by hunger and thirst, sun and wind. They are persecuted by hunters and the like in many ways, and are constantly terrified. So you should feel saddened and repulsed when thinking of the many ways in which they suffer.
지자다 데다도 게디 치와 당시 지자다 데네기 게서들마 못버스도 나공날마 출마 딩딩만 나공차들와 왜를 매디가 나공다는 산나로마 게데는 나공데네 그 두시 문반나네 안 마추날마 게데네게 한데서 배 지양식 현代지금 수행이 가면은 배 깔레로 gen고를 차진 또 신의 깔레 쇼지는 gen고 차도양 칼라사야 나가르나 강아 차도요 로봇이 메로 디네자데 두신의 게디 치와사데 디송로.
Moreover, they are born in darkness in the water, and there they age and die. So the process of birth, aging, illness, and death for animals, on one hand, it's not entirely separate from ourselves, but where it is vastly different is they are without support and assistance in the way that we are. So as they start to age and then death eventually comes, they are on their own. There is no support to help them in these times of trouble.
쿠르지웨 나와다스 쿠르지와스나 도레서 베네 냐마네다 모다다 nom주메디 모직 베주레 따레 루다 심젤바 케 지게신 파소 직 케네 지 쿠르쿠르제네 바 디니 지고에서 강아 망보여로 강아 디니게 강아 이콜 예제 강아 예데레스 쿠르지웨스 안디 마제 아직 대한주 야소날도 심제 리베디게 아니 그 두부 강에 심전 현다게 상수는 배직 강아시고 주의들어도 세면 지고여로 와서네 강아 먹고여라 지고 되네게 쿨 지워서야 돼 되네게 안에 강아여라 해야지.
Worn out by heavy burdens, they are put to the plough, shorn, driven, and killed miserably, and miserably by many means, different methods of slaughter. So this first part, they are worn out by heavy burden. So if we think back to the time before trucks, then animals were used in this way. They were used to carry produce. They're used to work in the fields. So this is still done in parts of the world today, but it's not nearly widespread like it was before. So this is a laboring that animals are forced to do. They have no choice. And we see also the way that animals take advantage of each other, harm each other. For example, in the oceans, sometimes we will see barnacles and other animals growing on turtles and other animals in the oceans. And the one animal is harming the other, well, not particularly intentionally, it's just surviving, but this is what they do to each other. So the forms of suffering in the animal realm are quite immense.
Nilhagis the Nime Tsiadang, then a harbor downward to Scanagana de Gangada. The Numba Shadikan, Mumba Digi, Dusina, and Chikpa, go to be the sugar, Kasigi, and the Tapagit, and Kasigi Daja, Kasi Mendaja Suena, in the Suena Dama Yungua, Mumba Digina, or Dusina Sugar, Subi, Dunga in the Yungore, essay, that is so much mounting as a tonsils Cuba and Tontigas Chagorua.
Moreover, that being forced into slave-like labor to plow and to help in other ways, as well as then having their bodies used, shorn, driven, and so forth. And then, at the end, they all get intentionally killed. And sometimes the death will be swift. It may be even unexpected, but mostly there's tremendous fear in the build-up to their slaughtering. Moreover, often the slaughtering is not done cleanly, and the whole process of having their life taken is one of not just terror, but also immense pain. Then furthermore, they are tormented by hunger, thirst, sun, and wind. And this too we can recognize. In terms of sun and wind, animals, due to their lack of intelligence, can do very little to protect themselves. They largely just persevere. And in terms of hunger and thirst, some types of animals can migrate much more easily than others. Most types, they just endure. And furthermore, they are persecuted by hunters and the like, and in many ways they are constantly terrified. So for ourselves, when we see the environment that wild animals live, for us it's very relaxing. We like to observe them, and for us, we maybe even fantasize about living somewhere remote and quiet, seeing how peaceful it is. But this is not how animals experience it. They are in constant danger of being killed by an animal that's more powerful and being hunted by humans. So they may live in environments that we find appealing and peaceful, but for them it's not. They still live in constant terror.
semjindikele ningje sembe ningje chungchura samdaida deneki da semjin suekanda desola de yago mare desope dugjere sembe da den semjele nösesinda yago mare chesa semjen lia koranzo toptan gugore sede dusin ene sunhay yungor bada di samgo mare shen anzuge da shera samnadi kogo marwa.
Whilst what has been described here, we are in our modern world, we are largely very aware of. But it's important still to reflect on, because one can all too easily romanticize the position that they are in. But really it is one of constant terror. And whilst this presentation may be approachable to us, for these actual beings, there will undoubtedly be other forms of suffering that they experience that aren't so apparent to us. So it's so useful because we observe, this is very real to us because we have seen these forms of suffering, that it's a basis for generating some compassion for them. And based on that, we can try and minimize the harm that we cause, and where we can give help, we do so. So there is benefit for us in this way too, of reflecting on the suffering of animals.
Dine zada ngana zugi dine gi digma yunjugi sam jitma she shine karche orasine deda le du namya ji yi rebe dunga chuwe sa dunga we chu nam sam de gyoshin yi dunga chawo sede yi junga chawo sede ta ngana du shine ni dunjugi dunga de den do yorwa se be dine gi ba ha ko che ha go ne dine karche orasine nga delma denegi kebaineda chikanga denis chegiro was da sosorangi sosoranga samdanga nyamne jebi ka chesa dizona joge sosoranga samada denis thobene sosolya denegi del mo bane del magia da del thayage tablam bezu chigyo marwa krasninga joge di sosoranga tana samdango mar nisu 통고다 adi yago mare sadi sheria mado chesa da garje orsen denegi nisu 통제 samdanga da suine dene ma kisigire mombana ngaya dele kisigire chesa te kebaine kanga dinish doa da chesa rawa gyune mi pago shuya da dene nyedon taya la so ban suedan dama so dene kanga nyungud pe dene tikin dene pe kanga nyungo ser disi dele tenga momba de dele ma kewa de chego dele tagudu sanbege samlo shikigo gorda nga nga jugin da dusin dene ke sosurana ya samda nga dele tagudu momba dene ma kewa de chego sanbege samlo leodu dene nga jugale선 dele kanes taore tarwe 탑 가는 시오래 세비기다 온두신 삼로들 leon 거래 제가 leodu 제가 난 데니기 둥안돌게 둥돌게 녀모 ongi kiawar 제자다 녀마사셰벨 녀모 바디기나 녀모 바 지게 뭐 또쇼고 내가 디바사시베 디바디기 파샤야다 데네 몽바나 데네기 디바 마사바지 수름소데 예저듬 수름소와나 데네기 레사바 마사바 데네게 마사셰바데 녀모 또쇼고네 샤바이나 데네기 데다로시 몽바나 데네기 둔돌기 말에 데네 마제 완서 소소 데네기 둥아리 용고 말에스 제산 소소 데네기 둥아들 타고 타투도 제산 데네기 때 원료고 봐 톱지네 덴델이야 안다테나 지가 주게 디기 주비하다 둥아세 탑람지도 가지고 용도 와스 데네 인자다 데네게 제네 빼사사레 데네 마제 와등이 탑 인지미지 제기인 셈비게 타고도 셈베 타되게 삼르게 걔네들이 델레 탈베 탑 냠랭이 림바디게 봐 아니 모두 신제화에 제고래 제다 제사 데니 동의 수남 삼대 이 교신으로 당아 데니 동의 삼다 이 교신 델레겐데 베사사레 삼베가 데니 베사사레 삼베 이 교 델레다 다고도 삼베 이 교신 이 중화자세 지사 데니게 삼다데 당고 그래 마도셴 데네 삼마다나 남긴디서 마시는 아주 뒤빈다 당고서 마 통고로 와다 로아
Lama Tsongkhapa concludes his paragraph with, so you should feel saddened and repulsed when thinking of the many ways in which they suffer. So this meditation, as in all the meditations in this section, one imagines how beings are suffering there now, imagines what it is like for them. But then it is imperative we take it to the first person to recognize that I may well be born there in my next life or in a future life. This is entirely possible. And then we imagine how it would be for ourselves if we were experiencing these sufferings. But not as a human being, because as a human being we have our intelligence and as well as communities which can help and assist us. As an animal, one does not have this. So one imagines oneself having to live in a constant fear of being caught and eaten by another, possibly eaten alive, as well as being exploited by those with more power, so by human beings, and being too dull and ignorant to do anything about it, as well as the sufferings of heat and cold, hunger and thirst, and recognizing that it is a life of slavery. It's not a life of relaxation or freedom at all. Then, having reflected in this way, so this is in relation to animals, but it's to the whole topic, reflecting in terms of the beings living there, as well as how it would be if I were living there as such a being, without my intelligence, without my community for support. Then it leads us to, where does it end? Feeling saddened and repulsed. So saddened for the situation of beings there, for those enduring right now in this way, and repulsed in terms of repulsing this the notion that in samsara there are pleasures to strive for, because these are the faults that follow, the suffering that can follow by continuing to be dominated by the afflictions. So one's repulsion is towards samsara, one's saddened for beings who are suffering there. And then the final point is this determination. I have to change the trajectory of my lives. Even if this life has largely been good and I've been accumulating virtue, I need to speed this up, strengthen this, and commit to both purifying past misdeeds and accompanying that, refraining from further misdeeds, and to ensure I live an ethical life. In other words, I restrain my mind from the afflictions. So the outcome of this meditation is not a despondent mind, it's not a weak mind, but rather it's a strength and determination arises. So one, in one's meditation, feels emboldened, empowered, recognizing that I have a precious human rebirth, I've met the Dharma, faith in the Dharma, and I can change this and lives to come. This is how the quality of mind with which this meditation concludes. What is to be avoided is to approach this as a story. This and other sections here. Otherwise, it's no different from watching a wildlife documentary, seeing our animals live and being taken up by either sorrow for them or the beauty of their environment. This is not the purpose. These are real lived experiences for mother beings. Moreover, they are real possibilities where we may well be reborn. Then Lama Tsongkhapa concludes with the lifespan of animals. As for their lifespan, the treasury of Abhidhamma states that the longest animal lifespan is 1 eon, and explains that the long-lived ones attain about an eon, while short-lived ones are unspecified. What's been clearly stated is the longest lifespan is that of an eon. And this last word, unspecified, it's more usually translated as uncertain. Then that's better, uncertain or indefinite. Because the shorter lifespans are very short. Some animals, their entire lifespan is very brief. So it's unspecified, the shortest ones. And of course, within this, whilst this is the potential lifespan, the lifespan of all animals is indefinite, in that they may well not live out their lifespan. They may die naturally or killed long before their lifespan concludes. And now we come to the presentation on hungry ghosts, or the Sanskrit pretas.
Sumba ni se Serna shi chir denpa nam ida so ye la yeda jang jegom na denpa na ba da shata ganbe dong tsiba dabu dong zhe keba ani shindu gamxing jie daba wos.
Those dominated by miserliness will be born as hungry ghosts. They are extremely hungry and thirsty. Their skin, flesh, and blood are so parched that they look like burnt logs.
Sena shukchembo, sena she shukchewayena, and digi sena je de be shukchewayena, digi genjena, mahana jege idala gitu wore, says Sundua.
So, of the causes to be born as a preta, miserliness is a dominant cause, but it is not a sole cause. The realm of spirits, or the realm of spirits, is a lower realm. Therefore, the dominant cause to be born in the lower realms is that of being unethical, or having poor ethics. So that is the dominant cause. But to be reborn as a preta, one not only requires the cause of poor ethics, but also miserliness.
Jowa dan Gunglo da denige tone semjimbe dikba chap chimbu shuwena digi genji nyewan ma ye lesa so ju ledi nyewa ye lesa dene da jik dele des ding jigi ba che ding yin ba che digale an kin so so ge so ju ge dikba chi ding chi che ba che delia ben sena shu che de ba yena che de ben di genji idal ma ye da che go da ko so ju be ledi ding ji ba che Lesa dela and di kalan roba, person sena shuche de sena yudibaina, le mawasayana, di genjina, idala girashaw. Tis that soldier de soldier jeta de dipasa or dibitu chunga de che, and the niggy sena shera jeme warushina, and was what I'm to get the dundul baki the chagor, as you want.
So to be born in the lower realms requires unethical causes created due to not being ethical. So, for example, that of killing. So if the non-virtuous cause is very powerful, it's more likely to lead to rebirth in the hells, less powerful as a spirit and less powerful than that as an animal. So therefore this shows that in terms of non-virtue, a particular type of non-virtue will have varying gradients of severity. So for example, that of killing. So killing has various components, that of motivation, that of the preparation, the performance, and that of motivation, that the object, the motivation, the performance, and the conclusion. Within that, the conclusion is always the same. The being that has been killed dies. But the other parts, there's tremendous variety. So the motivation, there will be motivation that is weak or intense, as well as the in terms of the performance. There are very differing ways to kill. Those that cause much more suffering, and where the death may be prolonged. So this then, of course, makes the karmic cause that much worse. So to be reborn then as a preta, one requires both a general unethical non-virtuous seed, such as killing, as well as being conjoined with miserliness or assisted by miserliness.
Kiawa chima ondio kopang kima do ile masawa tsurumi yaw maswa anji shen lia jimbi gi shen lia ro she da dini gi pemba mo jimba ya go tang ju gen ji da ju ya ji sweba lo maswa na anji gi dini sweba lo kom ding ji be na bena ga ji ge ki chi ge ba ne ki be ning chi bo sui tong na ba ki de ning chi bo do su go bu ji ji da mi da bo ge ji corona kala da da do ya wu xue de ji ru xue lo da你说你们去的结婚，可能大多钱呢，对谁的也不来，谁都也不来，就可能结完我们给金币给提不起来了。那可能来就可能你提不起，你虽然可能来别购钱来的，我接下来的可结完我们可能随便提不起来了。过去的结婚这个是出去马上去结完了，其实出去苗我送的米里结完了，大概就我就可把头，其实出去马上建议或结晒的多多的结上的。이내 개왕 아마 그 진비 냠는다 진배다 아니 쇠바 공부 이제 니기 연진 니 대부디 코로나 자야도야다 되사게 강아 균에 메티 맨줄라서 받아 되니게 아니 지금 코로나 미스 지수는 배 거부시에다 코로나 정부치에도 코로나 가라라 개와디 코로나 님의 쇠비지와 차고로와 어두스에 아니 지금 아주 미로시는 미배 지게 미 사야도야 마라 강아시우 도시 강아시우시게 유에디게 아니 지금 미션다이나 토나 배직 가부마시겐 지 여러 와다 니는 어디서 그 추름송요래 추름송제 아주기 계자도 미시와래 개발된 바래 레 추름송이 원료고 바토야기 레사요래 지산 밀리게와래 지산다 그 세들이야 그런 사야도야다 튕긴 강아요디 개왕아마게다 곧 진비기 마치바지 콜세나다 디니시비 긴기 두시네 개와자 차이로 제자들 수유도나 지 마가와다 지 거우메와제디 콜마 통초자 거우메와제디 그렇게 할수 세빈냐면시다 내지긴 디니스 연구를 해서 제자 디니자다 수주야 마송와 디니기 세바다 디니게다 진비냐면 마치바 세나로 죽신 보여면 이 이달의 기고를 해서 지수 모르다
So through poor ethics, one is born in the lower realms. And depending on the strength of that propelling imprint, one is born in one of the three, either as an animal, or if it's a more severe imprint, as a preta, or a more severe imprint that propels the rebirth, it is then in the hells. So it's ethics, or the lack thereof, that determines rebirth in the lower realms and which realm. In terms of one's conditions in that rebirth, this is dictated by by accompanying imprints, such as generosity or the lack thereof, patience or the lack thereof. So, for example, as said here, being born as a hungry ghost, then one's poor ethics is accompanied by miserliness. This will lead to rebirth as a preta. But let's say the propelling imprint to rebirth in the lower realms is one of non-virtues, perhaps killing, but it's not a particularly strong non-virtuous imprint of killing. Then the being takes rebirth as an animal. And let's say this rebirth then is accompanied by some really good virtuous karma. The being will be reborn, for example, as a dog. So some dogs are in remarkable circumstances. They are enjoying the fruits of their generosity in previous lives. They live as a pet. Their environment is safe. Their home is comfortable and stable. It's warm in the winter. It's cooled in the summer. And for food, all they need to do is wag their tail and food is delivered. Their life is very easy in terms of the quality of the conditions they have. But they are still stupid. They are still restricted in terms of their capacity because they are just dogs. But they are enjoying the benefits of their generosity. Also, dogs have varying personalities. Many are enjoying the fruits of patience. Perhaps there may be a beautiful breed, and then people who see them think they're just magnificent. And they lean forward to stroke the dog, to pat the dog. And because the dog is enjoying the fruits of patience, the dog immediately bonds well or reacts well to people and develops close relationships with others easily. So this we see very clearly with many breeds of dogs, that they are enjoying the fruits of patience. Other dogs, though, they're not so attractive. It takes a special, most people perhaps don't find them as attractive as others. And also some dogs have personalities that are not so pleasing. And there we see their fruits of patience are either entirely lacking or somewhat limited. So this is an illustration of a rebirth dictated by poor ethics, but then embellished by patience and generosity. Other animals, their situation is completely different. They are experiencing the results of unethical behavior, a lack of generosity, and a lack of patience. So this kind of animal, when most beings, such as humans, we see them, immediately fear or aversion arises towards them. We become apprehensive. People may well kill them very easily because fear arises in us. So there clearly is a result of not only unethical behavior, but a lack of patience. And they may struggle to support themselves. They do not live in a comfortable environment. They do not live in a safe environment. And they may struggle to get food and drink. There we see the result of lack of generosity. So in this way, we come to recognize how a variety of virtuous seeds are required to bring about a good rebirth. But most important is that of ethics, which keeps one in the higher realms. But again, for the topic here, to be reborn as a preter requires both poor ethics as well as miserliness.
ane denigi deda jane sena shechewe idasuke deda jan jekom de temba se to konzo gidi na kakom ya do zodo ya ji du sin de yonggo re sen ne ba ba da sha cha ganbie dong dong ci ba de be ji subu ji kashi de be ji sha da ba ba da ganbu den be ji be xin me ci ba na na bo ro xiao ro xin dong dong se me ci ba de ne di zhu bu ji da and 지게 동게 짜디게 동다 짜디게네 링부파 동디게 차상 갑디게 수업자 되네게 아니 신도 감신 아니 제다바세 되네 감보제 아니 배지 되네 제다바세도 자 칼라로스 추로시네다 되네 말을 지기 파도시네 도 스타디오에 되네 시공고래 해서지 대지당하로시
having then presented the causes for rebirth as a preter. Then Lama Tsongkhapa describes their experience. They are extremely hungry and thirsty. Their skin, flesh, and blood are so parched that they look like burnt logs. Their faces are covered with hair, their mouths are exceedingly dry, and they keep licking their lips with their tongues.
Adene ida de la pen rig masona rig sumro shoresen de la sumsen seogom la chinan jibo yoba seogom la nangi jibo yoba and seogom nila and jibo yoba wosaji denigida dushine rig masona ko sum yongore jere.
The Lama Tsongkhapa presents the three types of pretas. They may be categorized as three kinds. One, those with external obstructions to food and drink. Secondly, those with internal obstructions to food and drink. And thirdly, those with obstructions within food and drink itself.
Da denigi seogom la chine jibo yoba de chiloga shandane jibo yoba de la karasne deda do chimida chodan seo namso yuba na ane there semjen rari dang dung dang dung tung dang ane sungwa dagi chi gokbar chebe chuya nara do tone dungor midyo ba was.
Now to look at each of those three groups in turn, or three types in turn. The first, as for the first kind, when they approach springs, lakes, and ponds, they are stopped externally by sentient beings holding swords, spears, and lances. They also see the water's pus and blood and lose their desire to drink it.
지사다 간실에 이다디게 코노도 빼 카콤체 지카로 지콤체 추르 뚱가로도 대표니 두시 세야도 추여되다 추통고래 추여르데 따직 델레야 바시 샹다게 심전 샹다게 ben에 제다 동다 된디 천자 토시 콘주 용마 주베제 까고래 제 까시 지선 치 집어요 봐 지선 추 코롱기 추 코롱래 추 통고래 추여 여르데 샹다게 까지네 치로게랑래 샹다게 까지네 파 안데 지기 추디 랑래 베주다야라고 말 지선 되니기 치 집어 샹다게 까지 두시네 까고래스 맞아가 지 되니기 추디게 벤 나당 차로 통제 빠지 delya and chigi dongdo meba da chaji du sine go habra go mare che jesan chi jibo yobase pe ro chi tene sungdo pe sen ro chi.
The general suffering of pretas is this intense hunger and thirst. But there are those for whom there's abundant food and drink around them, or sufficient at least food and drink around them. But there are external obstacles to them being able to enjoy it. There are these beings who prevent them, making it impossible for them to partake in what surrounds them. So these are beings experiencing intense hunger and thirst. And just over there is the food and drink they desire. But they are stopped from approaching it. They're stopped from partaking even in the slightest by external beings. Hence these are pretas with external obstructions to food and drink.
Ida dade nangne jibo yoba sadi dadi gadeshorasin di ida rikti gadeshorasin kap mixam yoba sadi kad be chungchu resmado marache ne kap ki da kubu ki mixture dirosmad meres kap yoba da ane ka barwa se kale me barwa se barwa ane bawa chen se de bawa se na jugi 디와드 가 민도아 디네게 도도샤 도 직자게 도도슈 차야 저와 바와젠서 디네 디네스 용고래세 아니 수바 쳐와서 조베게 조디기 첨부 조고 첨부 나지 강발라과디 베 처부 충충 파부 조 첨부 아니 고디기 첨부 임바 게디게 베 충충을하세 아니 카디 캅디 베 카디 베 이가 충충마도 메가래 제자 디네에서 칼라라나 칼라사야라고 말하다 칼라 카는마 갑지마메자 디메지가 도하스카이 칼레 카고로와 도투게로 제자 디니게 난기 디바이바 치로게 칼라 지여바 젠다가가 메바 추당 디니가가 메바 라 통바 라바네 소시게 카나바 갑스마즈베 델바 비지 다투에 메바 아니 칼라바 주요데 메바 용고르메 진디 메바지 메바 아니 카 디바와게르자 안디니기 도시네 사투에 빌롱 사투가 마자야라고 말해서 저 로건 첨부에서 되는 데스 도지 로자스요 말아 강아시 되요 말아 진짜 되는지에서 수바 채와 데서 디바도
The second of the three
Yeah,
types.
the old Madido Achibarisha, Shangi, Ke Majeba, Rangi, Sekum Nidu Zinja, Sadum Minus. Chisada, Shangi, Ke, Pashi, Deji Dambodlipa, Sosotona, Sosai, Kata, the Yahuyana, Janda Gashi, Satugo, Marago Marwa. That did the Gaga Meba, Corona, Saya, Tuya, the Chuda, Chiragu, Manaya, Sakoron, Bijutan to go, Madadi. The Corona, was Corona Kala, then they get on again, Chatter.
The second type, those with internal obstructions to food and drink. So as we see here, the obstruction does not come from others, but from their own body. The second kind of mouths like the mere eye of a needle. So they have large heads, but a tiny, tiny mouth. So this is their obstacle to both eating and drinking, that they cannot put food or almost no water through this tiny mouth, despite their intense hunger and thirst. Their mouths blaze with fire, and they have goiters and swollen bellies. So even if they get some moisture into their mouths, it immediately evaporates because of this fire within their mouths. So they have this obstruction that they can't get food in. They can get a tiny amount of water, and then the water cannot get into their body and replenish their thirst, quench their thirst because of this fire in their mouths. Then they have goiters on their throats. They can't swallow food, and their bodies are swollen. So they have this large head, this tiny mouth, this swollen belly, and just spindly legs. So their legs struggle to support this poorly proportionate body with a swollen belly and a large head. And even if they end up finding food and drink, so the food and drink isn't as plentiful as for the first type of preta, those who have the external obstructions. Here the food is less plentiful, but they even when they encounter it, whilst there is no one stopping them from partaking, they have obstacles within their own body in relation to the fire in the mouth, their tiny mouths, and so forth.
Kata dene ke kanga me ba na sele ke kyungi thone ane parse yugen jin kanga jores di ri da parse jida de kana jores ne meji changwa chen she jaba ne sue ba da thongwa tham je me ba ne chilas jenshin sawa she jaba ne ane xiangji sai jin thongwa da mi zang xin namla jinga wa da ne ba da me ba chawa zamla sadong je dos.
Then the third of the three types. So these are pretas with obstructions both within food and drink. It's with obstructions within food and drink itself. Among the third kind, the fire garland ones get burned because everything they eat and drink catches fire. The filth eaters eat excrement and drink urine. And the third, they eat and drink only what is unclean, smelly, harmful, and disgusting.
Samlaya Satoshi Gore said that it does Yida does so the chair of Chakore. Oh, this is the course I had to what a bed do just I regular. Did you make this I want like your marva? Idana and Idana and say this way and as I had just talk water that she been Mizanwa the society regular.
So of the three types of pretas, this type with its various different groupings is seen as having less suffering than the others, because at least they are able to access food and drink, so there's no external obstacle, and they have no inner obstacle in terms of their body to engaging in the food and drink, so they can eat. But for them, due to their karma, there is a problem with the food and drink itself. So we see in the first type the first type within this. The fire garland ones get burnt because everything they eat and drink catches fire. So they have food and drink, but when eating it, they cause themselves intense pain. And the second type, when they see food and drink, but when they approach it, then it becomes for them filthy. The filthy eaters eat excrement and drink urine. They eat and drink only what is unclean, smelly, harmful, and disgusting.
āndā kāchī nī xiāngchī sāshī sāvā tāng, tsāngmā tāng, sāngpūyā sātūng chū miñī sōs. Jiznā dī īdā kāshī jisāyā dī dīshīn yil shēpā nī bē tsokpā tā dī nī xiāngshī dā tsokpā dī bē dukjā dī kī sāyā mā tō tsāngmā tā sē, tsāngmā tā yāpū dī kī sātū kō mā rē sī nī.
Within this type of preta, we've looked at one type, fire garlanded ones, and they are the filth eaters. And then there are others. Some cut their own flesh and eat that. They cannot consume food or drink that is clean and wholesome. So here too, we see that they can't, like the filth eaters, eat food and drink, or eat food and drink that is wholesome. They end up eating their own bodies.
다는 이다디게 가와요레세 니에디 되서로 니에디 가와요레세 니에니 제비 갑 점빌링 디오 바세가자 제바나 유진 셴니 딜레 최베게 죄질레 셰도스.
As with the previous presentations, now Lama Tsongkhapa presents their abode where the pretas are to be found. The treasury of Abhidharma Auto Commentary states that their main abode is situated 500 yojanas below the city of Rajagriha in this world, while other hungry ghosts have spread out from there. And again, as elsewhere, then Lama Tsongkhapa presents their lifespan. As for their lifespan, levels of yogic practice and the treasury of Abhidharma explain that 1 human month is a day for them, and that they survive for 500 of their years. So here Lama Tsongkhapa presents his source and explains that the length of their lifespan, as we can see here, is immense when compared to us human beings. So therefore, they do not quickly pass from the suffering at all.
다 시딩레 잔데지 지바데 시딩 나라가 손세 바셰 메버 동아 땡유르바 네버 제비기 레기 샤바네 사위 징비 류진 카지로 나동 다바 나동 다단 치양 치미 유르셰 송스.
And then Lama Tsongkhapa quotes a letter to a friend, enduring, and I've just inserted one word in the second line, enduring suffering uninterruptedly, fettered firmly by the noose of negative deeds. Some embodied beings do not die for 5 or even 10,000 years.
가신 롱아동 되고 가신 루치되어 봐 용거래 다디 안 가셔야 지금 나동 주동다 든동다 되니까 도시어로 와다 틀리만 뇨아돼 용거로 와디 바라 아디레다 디 지제레진 제시죠 돈다 지바르셔.
So this quotation is because before Lama Tsongkhapa he referenced sources. Here he's showing a source. And in here we see, with further information is provided, that there is a variety of lifespans endured by pretas. Some embodied beings do not die for 5 or even 10,000 years.
那说说谁我就送说是。其实当俺说什么鸟啊、伊的、多的给了这驴给切中个这个人，切中了眼巴有嘛？开心的轻薄有了，开心的穷有的，其实或者驴切的那些是眼巴开要嘛的。可是呢，米给为给忘给，但米给我第一忘给可能连，可是啥边的第一忘给呢？苏博的切中那时候用过的，第二把都现在要的是，谁我是哪里都送要的去。
So then Lama Tsongkhapa commented on that verse. The commentary explains that the lifespan of some hungry ghosts is 5,000 years and others 10,000 years. And he goes on, in all three lower rebirths, the body size is indefinite. Levels of yogic practice says the power of the non-virtues gives rise to varying sizes. So here we see, again, as I spoke about earlier, independence on the strength of negative karma created. This determines both the realm that we end up in, as well as our physical basis, our body, upon which we experience suffering, as well as the variety of conditions within that realm. So this all comes about to the varieties of karmic causes that ripen.
Dada me marmodo lapa chugnes sha chik debadang ane gun la kan la chak busu gwe me par desam de debadang ane sha kha yang sadung me badang lu la jangbu so so ta bi ge zamya so ka na ne chanya da janya da ida da durogi duroji gi chila semburs me mi bi ge dunga 다기 지대로 쇠벌 자스 쇠냠도 상고래세 쇠냠도 세
Lama Tsongkhapa then concludes the section with an outline how it is necessary to meditate on this until experience is gained. Accordingly, when you think about the sufferings of the lower rebirths, you should reflect. If it would be difficult for me to sit for one day with my hands stuck in embers, or simply to sit in a freezing cave during a winter storm without clothes, or to be deprived of food and drink for a few days, or for my body to be bitten by flies and the like, then how could I bear the sufferings of the hot hells, the cold hells, the hungry ghosts, and the animals that devour each other alive?
me ba wi kabla lagwa ju di pa shu sha sha ba na sha ba chi ja tu go re sin sha ba chi de tu ma wa sha ne be gang a na cha ne shi wo ji kan de sha ba de si sa na shi ho cha ne du nga chung go ro gang a yung go ro was en di na je da gun ga la ya lagwa de mo kyap she de kabla ya en nga ju ge lagwa ki ba chi du lo de me ba che ma ra pi che lagwa nam shi dra mo kan de tu se be chi denegi de tu ya ka ma chi ni na de tu ya ka la kha bo shu ro was denegi sha ba chi de wa na be ma se du ngo yo ro was that is what you do sing nyamnyo to da hago to gura and dine sha khashi sha khayar and sadung me ba na khala mara ba che nimi khashi tebe ne be ro to na ka ni ba gyne me dige du sin ro to du sin ne kang a shi ji yor was na lu la jang be se da ge ji chi lo ba de ji du lo bi se ne be ji du zha la so ba de ne bu ge so jam ne cha ne ga se ka de yo ji sang a zu sue tu ya yum yum min do was ji sang a zu na de ni ka ble ya denigi 차와길에 뒤에 마토바당 장무길에 뒤에 마토바 아니 칼라 자메바 뒤에 마토바 강아스 데네 여바다 아니 부다 데니게 소잡나 데니게 수에 마토바 강아 여바딩 아주기 빼 강아 첨부 슈디 여바딩 아주 하고투도 와스 지산 딜레데 당 아주기 차와딜 뒤에 마토 차위 강아딜레 녀와 창에서데 딜레다 조직 창에디다 차와 숙체 강한 숙체와 윤리고 용고야 돼. 지난다 장예 삼다반의 소수기 둘러매와 냄시 장모 공개 가라 직두신 둘러마고 받는데 kama khashe de me de kya kanga yoba na shin de kanga samta de nyawa danye se de lo pa do me ba kanga dile shuk chewa kanga pa do me ba nyong go ya jesa dine ge du do ina da nganjulia jik du lo pi ji de bu do ma da dine du ra so ge de san de ma to ba dile da dun do ke na mi pa ba shu se ba din ja ma se dung pa do me ba yong go jesa dine ge du chen samta ne so su ngānsu che dēli ya kāngā che dāng sām dāng chen dā dīli dāb gyūru shūk che shiu zi dā dā che dāng nyāwā dāng yidā dāng dun rūwa dēni ki ngānsu la kye sāng dā bē sā sā rē che dāng dēni ki che dēli dēni ki nē kāpa ngānsu mī dēn dēli ya dēni shi kāngā che dāng kāngā shiu yu bā dā dīli dā dā nyāwā dāng yidā dā dun rūwa kye dēni bā tu mē bā kāngā yor wā dā kāngā dēli dā mā tān dā tab mī dā mā wā bā nā ngā dēli mā kye wā mī jī jē gu tu sēn bē kē dā dū shi nā sēn bē kye wā rē sē wā rē
Lama Tsongkhapa says here, accordingly, when you think about the suffering of the lower rebirths, you should reflect. So here you see Lama Tsongkhapa stating what I've said earlier, is that we approach this topic, as with all Dharma topics, reflect, taking it as personal advice, personal to us. So not just a mere description of far-off lands, but of what potentially could befall us, and what other beings are enduring right now. If it would be difficult for me to sit for one day with my hands stuck in embers, or simply to stay in a freezing cave during a winter storm without clothes, or to be deprived of food and drink for a few days, or for my body to be bitten by flies and the like. So here he's describing the situation in the various hells, in the hot hells, where beings have their hands stuck in embers and so forth. For ourselves, we know if we just slightly burn our hand, immediately we remove our hand from that source of heat, because we cannot take even a moment of slight extreme heat. These beings have no capacity. They do not have the option to remove themselves from that suffering. This they have to endure continuously. They cannot remove their hands from burning embers. They have to endure. And likewise, for ourselves, we have the intelligence to say, if something's hot, we remove ourselves from the situation, or we wear clothing to protect ourselves from the sun. These beings cannot do that. And so too with cold. These beings in the cold hells, they cannot put on warm clothing like we can if we are in a freezing environment or turn on a heater. They cannot remove themselves from that situation. We may move from somewhere cold to somewhere warm, from outside to inside. In that cold hells, that cannot be done. You just suffer and die and reborn. Suffer, die and reborn. One cannot escape. So we recognize how we could not endure this. And similarly, being deprived of food and drink for a few days. So we know if we just go without water for a short while, or food for a short while, our mind gets tense and we get uptight. And we desperately seek out solutions, and generally we can find them. But for beings in the Preta realm, what can they do? This is the strength of their karma determines they will just suffer like this and die. Suffer and suffer and suffer. They can do nothing about their situation. And where further? Oh, and they'll be bitten by flies and the like. So for ourselves there, we know we can do something. If we are in a situation where there are insects that are potentially biting us, we can either remove ourselves from that situation, or we can protect ourselves with clothing. Beings in the neighboring hells, they cannot do that. Where there are those insects or birds that attack them, they cannot protect themselves. They just suffer. So this is the situation for beings there. And we recognize, how could I bear the suffering of the hot hells, the cold hells, the hungry ghosts, and the animals that devour one another? So we reflect in this way, recognizing just how unbearable it would be for us and how it is for beings there now.
Tineza dadargi nyamla pane shindu jishin tape yigi gyuwa matyenpa do kombar chawos.
Lama Tsongkhapa continues, You should meditate whilst evaluating such experiences until a change of heart occurs, giving rise to intense fear and terror.
제가 대다로 냠라 빠네 시디 대시간 저기 제들이 아주리아 캬바이나 체든 지기 가서를 차와 체당 저기 진남시 장모 들어오면 받네 캬베 동아 안에 자야도야 말아 임식이 하바나 제베 강아 안 부라서베기 대 소잡나 되네게 동아여 바디 또 소수기다 아주 연구어 바 대수 용화제 대수기 냠 대지 하고 되네 하고나 디 하고 비 용외 토네다 되네기 다 제들 양한 남시 정부 되네 집에 차와 질매갈 도시 지원 차와 되네 요번에 된야와 찬께서 가르스 강아요래서 딜리다 축체 여러 와서 비 도시네 소소 장만나로 캬베 동아 되네 도와 딜레다 야와 장연 되네 딜레 동아 되네 여러 와서 비 도시네 삼단 냠라 빠빠서 체디 소소게 강아 되기 도시네 파서 마음바디 여바디야 도시네 도시 냠라 빠 되네 이제는 되네 하고 있는데 아제다 델레 마타는 탐민 옷에 델레다 뺏는 뺏사사래서 델레 타고도 선비기 되네 되네기 가성기 냐와 이다 둔조 숨기 가성기 동아 델레 파 델레다 마탄 탐민 옷에 비기 델레야 짜네 델레 타르게 삼바 이규하지 이규지 타고도 선비 삼로디 안 도시는 공고래서 되네 영화 마탱이 봐도 이규와 마탱이 봐도 공부하자고 되네도 지네 야네 삼삼다도 된데 그디나 삼만 다 되네데 타고 선비게 삼로지마도 용매하래 연구하래 이제는 영화 유화 첨발해 다들 가서 되네 삼들이 샤샤 되네 여러 삼마도 진직 삼리야 안 직다다 타고 선비 삼리고 말아 띵한서 마고면서 삼도 유화 턴투요 말해 도선 단예비 동아디게 야와다 이다다 난도 동아디게 된데 여러와 삼다지 아 동아 델레 되네요면 델레다 마타나 탑미노 선비 삼라 게디나 되네지 삼로지 코로 된바다 내는 영화 퇴 유화 튼거래 심 유화 루거다 심 유화 제자 되네기 게디 이네 되네지 델레다 마타나 탑미노 선비 삼로디 좀 많이 봐도 깨게 디마게 봐도시네 삼다야네 양도 삼다 공고르시다 제지도 공부하시고 말때 야네 양도 중제 삼다 델레 타고도 선비게 마타바는 델레기 루도 깨바는 강아테 누구다 선비 되네기 도시네 삼다에도 안 지금 델레야 안에 공부하시도 영화 맞춤 봐도 공부지 야네 양도 삼도 델레다 마탄데 탑민 델레 타고도 선비 삼로디 기디나 레드여지 차고로와 디네 이제 디말 디네 말에 봐도 공고리에서 도시 영화 맞춤 봐도 공부하자고
This is an absolutely key sentence that presents how to meditate in general and the very purpose of this chapter. You should meditate whilst evaluating such experiences until a change of heart occurs. So it's very clear we're talking about this chapter here, but this is also general advice in that every single topic of the Lamrim needs to be meditated on repeatedly over a sustained period until a change of heart comes. And when a change of heart comes, one then must continue to meditate on that same topic until the change of heart is stable and will not ever waver, no matter what obstacles we may encounter. So this is crucial advice contained in just the first half of the sentence. So in the context here, it's been presented then the overall description of the experiences of the lower realms. And it's been presented in a way that we can relate to, because we've either experienced suffering such as this in a very slight manner, or we've observed it elsewhere in the world. So we can relate to this. So we can imagine what it would be like to experience such suffering, because we have experienced it a bit. And then we imagine experiencing it in a way where we are helpless. We cannot remove ourselves from the situation. We cannot even remove our hands from burning embers. We cannot remove ourselves from this area where there's no food and go to another area. We are absolutely helpless. The strength of our karma is such that there's nothing that we can do. This is a situation we know for animals. They're being led to slaughter. What can they do? They are just going step by step closer to a painful, an unwanted ending to their life. So this we need to meditate on again and again, so that it impacts on us. And when you feel an impact, and this is important advice, don't think the meditation has now served its purpose. That impact needs to be stable. So therefore, one needs to keep returning to the topic. And the usage of this term, until a change of heart occurs, giving rise to intense fear and terror, this indicates how one experiences this change of heart. So when this arises in an abiding manner, then our heart is being penetrated by the teaching. This is required. Because if we do not meditate on these topics, including this one, again and again, the words will continue just to wash over you. They will not penetrate your heart. And if they do not penetrate your heart, they will not lead to sustained change. Then one keeps hearing teachings, one enjoys the experience, but one's mind stays largely unaffected. The outcome of meditating on this topic again and again is, the initial outcome is fear and terror for such rebirth. But when this has been brought about in a stable way, what fear and terror refers to is creating the causes that would lead to such a rebirth. Then one can imagine the strength of mind one has to be ethical. That when one is presented with a possibility of engaging in non-virtue, fear and terror for engaging in non-virtue arise. Then one's ethics is stable. And even when one is presented with a great temptation, when fear and terror for engaging in unethical behavior will ensure one's mind stays freed of the afflictions. This is the outcome we are striving for in this meditation.
다다르기 된 상회에서 대대로 삼네 알아서 종화당 치마를 주버 뉴도 조시 나를 개왕 알아서 dimba 작배 몰람기 스카규르에 망불 배와당 서도 슈비 고두마 시기라 슈베 초베 니마 레레라양 다와 던전도 자유라스.
Lama Tsongkhapa continues, as you think about this now, with your good rebirth, you can purify whatever non-virtue you have accumulated previously and lessen what you might engage in later on. Your intense aspirational prayers will direct the virtue you accumulated previously, thereby multiplying it, and open up many avenues for engaging in them anew. Every day, there will be some new way to make your freedom meaningful.
이사 다대가 주기 되니게 냐와다 이다다 눈주게 두신 동화 삼제 델야 지게 강아들라 타고도 선배 삼당도 당외는 안줄이야 탑시 요레스 다대 땅 델마게기 안줄 탑시 요레스 가르스네 다대电상회 다대 안줄 리된데 연주 리된 电상보레 电델야 냠낸 가르체베네 지투고레스 电상보에서 대대로 삼네 알사 종화다 시도 지사 누신의 강아들라 타고도 선배 삼당시 다대 电델야 아니 냐마사시비 근데 디바사시바되게 디바님도 뜻이고도 두신 디바치 파 종으로 장고래서 장반에 마사 장반에 바 장고래 종고래서 종화다. 되네 치마라 주바 뉴시에스를 되네게 삼단에 류가이스 예제 dom제 출음 송여도 아니 녀바 디바 사바사디 뉴뉴뉴뉴뉴 조래서 제가 두신에 제가다 되네게 딱 냐와 이다 둔주기 동아대 삼통 되네 아델레다 마탄 탑은데 타고루 선배 삼다 제가 두신 삼다는 델마 타야게 탑람 된 가서 자디제나 제가 고비어 말했어 제가 인상에서 류딘디 电商部 단주리 톱대야 되네 잠 电델이야 나사셔비 디바디 님벼 뜻이고네 길 디ponje 바장 아니지 다다 아주기 그디나 리뉴제 좀 추림도 수도 송되바 있는 송바이나 되네 녀바 사바 마사바 근데 도시네 성무송의 송전에 녀바 춘 사야 사바사 용용 루고래 사지 송도
Building on what was said in that crucial previous sentence. This year, Lama Tsongkhapa goes on to explain how this meditation, what this meditation should lead to. Because this is how we determine whether this topic has been cultivated within us. As you think about this now, so as you reflect on the sufferings of the lower realms, as you think about this now with your good rebirth, so we are able to sit here in comfort and in ease and think and reflect on what others are experiencing. So we can meditate on it at a distance in the sense that this is an intellectual exercise for us. But those beings who are bound in these lower realms now, they do not have this luxury. This is the luxury, the leisure, the freedom of this precious human rebirth. Those beings are overwhelmed by their suffering. And due to the strength of their karma and the intensity of their suffering, they are helpless. Their situation is hopeless. They can do nothing for themselves. We, though, with this precious human rebirth, we can meditate on those experiences, what others are suffering with now, from a distance. And we can do so not as mere voyeurism, but we can do so to bring about a determination to transform the future trajectory of our lives, to use well whatever it is that remains of this life. You can purify whatever non-virtue you have accumulated previously. So one can imagine that when fear and terror for the lower realms arises, with such a motivation, one's regret, in terms of the four opponent powers, one's regret, one's reliance, one's power of the promise, and one's intensity in the antidote are all greatly amplified, which means one's purification has an intensity that would otherwise be lacking. Lama Tsongkhapa continues, and lessen whatever you might engage in later on. So by developing this fear and terror for the causes, one easily lessens the engaging in further non-virtue. Lama Tsongkhapa continues, your intense aspirational prayers will direct the virtue you accumulated previously, thereby multiplying it and opening up many avenues for engaging in them anew. So here, not only does one multiply past accumulated virtue, so in one's virtuous activities now, one accumulates extensive virtue because of the fear and terror one has for the causes, or for unethical behavior, for non-virtue. One thereby engages in virtue with an intensity. So not only does one purify extensively, but one accumulates extensively. And then Lama Tsongkhapa states, every day there will be some new ways to make your freedom meaningful. And this is the long-lasting benefit that comes in this very life, in that we know we are living a life of great meaning. And from this, a confidence arises, a joy arises, and we are able to apply ourselves in the Dharma consistently with a mind ever less distracted by the pleasures of this life or the meager problems of this life. Rather, a mind that is taking joy in the Dharma and a confidence that we are transforming ourselves.
shubi chobe nimare laya ane yan dawa dwenjedu jaryu sidim 제당 주기 나르사 개와 녀마스 개와 사샤베네 개와 춘주르 쉐베네 다다 아주다 코위에 나송게 동아디게 타고 선배들em 동아디 교연도 동아라 타르되게 삼보 숙심부기 dum바디네 숙심부기 어디 디네 나르사시베 개와디기나 카규제 누바체르고 레스까지 먼저 고바토 규차고 레스 중도아 진짜 dum바타비게 데네게 dum바타비 온게 지몰람 잡두시에도 나르사베 개와디기 먼저 고바토 규마이나 다 디네게 dum바타비 온게 두시에 몰람 제 타고 선배 탐다 개와디 몰람 자여도 디네 나르사시베 개와디기네 먼저 고바토 규르 파 Guriadang and Chikpa Kevadi Mango Pewaseda, Kevadi Nivo Shucher, Nivo Chertangor, Mango Pewada said.
To comment further on what I've just read, your intense aspirational prayers will direct the virtue you accumulated previously, thereby multiplying it and opening up many avenues for engaging in them. So again, having developed through this meditation a genuine terror and fear, again, not just for the potential rebirth in the lower realms, but now develop further than that, a terror and fear towards the potential accumulation of non-virtue, this will lead to a multiplication or multiplying of our previously accumulated virtue, and mean we'll accumulate extensively more virtue now. And this works in addition to what I said in the previous segment, that one is not only developing a determination to not create the causes to be reborn in the lower realms, a motivation of a being of initial capacity, but in dependence on your many years of studying the Dharma, you will your other trainings will come into play here, and your determination to gain liberation from samsara in its entirety, this will grow within you. So for you now, in dependence on your years of training to this point, engage wholeheartedly in the trainings shared with the practitioner of initial capacity. It won't only lead to a determination to gain a good rebirth, but to bring an end to samsara, and thereby one will never ever face the possibility of suffering in the ways described here.
Dasar du chube ki ko duma shigla chube chube nima re la ya dawa tunje du 자유 시대다 서도 주바세 지상 안송의 동아들라 타고 선배 타도게 선배 되니게 진다 서도 주바 주름소야 예제든비 주름소야 되니게 나 되네 이다게 동아되게 삼다이들 내래 타고 선배다 류가 가서 아주 진배 냠nen지야 쇠배 냠nen지야 노신에 지게 다지 최고부가 라서 바다 디바샤 발라서 바 되네 지게 되니게 된다 도신에 디바 가서 개발 주연도 서도 주고 제가 디비게 개비 주야게 초 탐진에 고 망부톤에 나가 망부톤 도시네 주름소야 진배 냠nen지야 최외 볼라 디바샤 발라서 바 되니게 제요도 아니 도시네 개와 사용 걸 제가 님을 레레레도 제요도 지는 대외띠 된제도 줘 봐. 지상한도 대외 다데 다와 류딘 다쇼게 띠 톱되어 바디 된제도 기구레시데 된제도 지그리스는 개와 치면 원dio 거방 토비하다 개와 치면 아송의 동안에 타르제 되네 원dio 거방 토여기 규디 사고레스 지단 된지 규사 사고레스 된제도 지고레스 된제도 저 열라스 되네기 제바나 뭔스든지 쭉투여기 된 지투고레스.
Staying with the same part of the text, as you think about this now, with your good rebirth, you can purify whatever non-virtue you've accumulated previously and lessen what you might engage in later on. Your intense aspirational prayers will direct the virtue you accumulated previously, thereby multiplying it and opening up many avenues for engaging in them anew. Here, this final part, I read too much, the final part, and open up many avenues for engaging in them anew. What determines, as already mentioned, what determines the strength of the karma created, whether virtuous or non-virtuous, is the strength of the motivating mind. So having given rise to fear and terror for the suffering of the lower realms, in particular fear and terror for creating those causes anew, this will bring an intensity and a focus to our practice that thus far is lacking. We will experience this change. We will seek out opportunities to engage in our practice. We'll easily let go of what would distract us. And moreover, this intensity and focus will continue into our daily life, ensuring we keep our mind focused on being free of the afflictions, focused on virtue. Then when we engage in formal practice, engage in both the accumulation of virtue and the purification of non-virtue, because of this intensity of mind and our determined focus, huge stores of virtue will be accumulated. For example, when we're engaging in generosity, our mind of generosity will be powerful and thereby immense karma, positive karma accumulated. And our ethics too will be abiding and lasting, making sure our mind doesn't come under the influence of the afflictions. This is how we open up many avenues for engaging in them anew, accumulation and purification, and how we come to make this life meaningful. And this will be experienced every day. Because of this intensity and focus, our practice will no longer be partial. It will be continuous.
Dada dena masana ngandro tuwe che jiba deda gyobige cha japza ya miye shi di se jawa dan jawa mayin bige dolin las lu tu me paran junju le son sos adonda la karsun worsene dada ngana zulya nyamnen chegi denegi che go ye de bares jidan go ye batila mache bache du sha sha bana ani nimji ngandro ma ki rung gores ngandro ke sabana den dele gyobige an tap 가르쳐비는 탑재는 예요 말이지. 냠네 제투야 고고요 말이지. 제가 매반자 대체 아니 지금 안들을 끼어도 대sel이야. 아니 지금 돌린 집에 그 간듯이 빵고 그래. 강아세 탑람 가르쳐 어디 집에 남주기 셔럽이야 요 말이지. 제가 되니기 균되기 봐세야다. 균 디기루에 탑람 파자와다 자와 많이 바게 집파도야다. 냠네 개와 냠네 제디 남지 제디 실로 누바야 거요 말 시라 거요 말에서 제가 되는 안도께 사와나 되니게 탑시야 용 말에 되네 삼로 다야 두고 말에서 다된 안도 단주리 된 뒤유비 값들로 고급 유리 값라 도시는 냠네 제고 그래서 되는 임부터 숨도
Lama Tsongkhapa then concludes with, if you do not think about this now, then once you have fallen into the lower rebirths, you will not find a refuge that protects you from those fears, even if you look for it. At that time, you will lack the power of mind to adopt what should be done and discard what should not be done. This is explained in Entering the Bodhisattva's Way. So, Lama Tsongkhapa now brings many of the topics that we've looked at that thus far and combines them or brings them together here. So part of the pitiful plight of beings in the lower realms is that because of as we've seen in this chapter, there's both the intensity of their suffering as well as the strength of the karma that dominates them there, they are helpless. Their situation is hopeless. They can do nothing to help themselves. All that can happen is the karma finally, after an immense period of time, wears itself out, exhausts itself. But for that entire period of time, they do not have the capacity to come up with solutions. They do not have the capacity to even think about seeking or protecting refuge. They do not have the capacity for their previous imprints of the Dharma to ripen within them and thereby guide them in terms of what to adopt and what to abandon. They cannot do this. They are helpless. Their situation is hopeless. But we, with a precious human rebirth, we hold our future in our hands. For the vast majority of human beings, they have no idea about this. They do not recognize their potential. Having reflected well on our precious human rebirth, we have this understanding that with this incredible intelligence and having met the Dharma and an interest in the Dharma, we can radically transform the trajectory of our future lives. We can radically transform our direction of travel. But the time to do so is now. The time to do so is now because we may well not meet such an opportunity again. So in this way, Lama Tsongkhapa brings your previous meditations here and builds on them further.
나는 당한 저기 삼 냠는 지역에 조 삼단하로시 당한 저기 도신다고 군로로시 계시모 작으로 되네 자다 심제 탐제에 된의 교육군세 유대 군대 상계 고바의 토고도 선비의 토벌치인 세배 삼로시 네 당보 도신의 삼다 토바시 대자다 상계 고모 토발라 냠는 지고월 냠는 다 파신주게 냠는다 잠니지라서 냠는 지고월 대제발에 띵케바지 고월에 나 되는 띵들이야 나고 여바나신 다 개와 치마이나야 띵 지금 띵케바진 원도고 토고도 되네자다 개와 치마 다 지금 되니게 원도고 마토바시 나송을 계속배나 나솔레다 냐와다 이다다 둔두게 도신 동아디네 도와스 진짜 되니게 동아 용과 차우다 되니 동아 용서 띵델 동아 용고다 배사 되니게 로톤타 먹보네 치자 먹보네 진데 최시야 고급 균에 레기미도 저서 소소 동아 용고 바데 yin 바셔 동아 빠도 메마 디네시다다 나송의 동아래 타르체네 개와체마 원디오 고반 톱 땡디 다 땡캬바제 잠니제 장슈sem라서 차사 냠네지리 땡 원디오 고반 마토네 탑미도 선배 삼다제 도시네 삼다 디토베 체도다 마주 류가 이수 예전에 수림소야 안에 지게 소수기 인진배 동회 sem바 장진배 냠렌지야 되는 수버 공야 되네 나 전주 좀야 아니 지게 몰란지마메 바게와 치마 아니 지게电商部토에 개위신이나 디 덴델이야 아니 지게 타바침배 잠니제 냠자셨습니다. 소바 냠렌지네 냠렌 탈신보 용어 쇼세비게 도시네 몰람게 되다가서 삼다이디 디샤고래 더디버리시네.
To present then, just very briefly, or present in brief, a meditation to do, having reflected on the suffering of the lower realms. Firstly, start with the aspiration to become a Buddha, so as to lead all beings, so that they gain actual protection from suffering in the ways described here. In other words, to lead all beings to attain freedom from cyclic existence. But for this aspiration to actually arise within me, I have to develop actual love and actual compassion for others. And to do that, I require a number of causes gathering together, ripening in the form of a precious human rebirth, which I now have. But this precious human rebirth, already much of it is gone. There's not much that remains. And of that much that remains for most of us, our strength, our capacity is not growing, but declining. So therefore, I need to make a change. I need to change what I value and prioritize and put my energy into utilizing this life well now, because it is entirely possible that I may fall into a rebirth described here. Therefore, before death comes, I must apply myself. And how to apply myself, or what to apply myself to? In particular, I need to cultivate ethical restraint. I need to, at the very least, ensure I do not cause harm with my physical behavior. And that's not too much for me. And I therefore need to strive also to ensure my speech is at all times ethical, that I do not create harm through my speech. These two are within all our capacity. And what we then need to also strive at, but it is much more difficult, but we need to strive at it, is to guard our mind, to keep our mind ethical. In other words, to guard our mind from coming under the influence of the afflictions. This I must do. And then, whilst this is the primary cause, I need to cultivate a generous spirit, a genuine patient outlook, and cultivate enthusiastic perseverance for engaging in the Dharma. And as well as to make prayer, to make excellent prayer, prayers such as to attain ongoing excellent human rebirths, so that I can continue my spiritual progression and attain liberation and enlightenment for the sake of others, and to do so, to continue to meet my spiritual teachers at a young age, to recognize them as such, to seek their guidance, and to strive to fulfill their guidance, and to create those causes to have such future rebirths. I commit to doing so from right now, to taking these teachings and applying them in my heart. So then, thank you. We can conclude therefore for this morning.
Can I just ask if the animals that might live in Eon, are they normally Naga type of animals?
So the animals that may live for up to an eon, are they nagas?
bene ha horon that you would go on with the just a horns if you do it go on with
both Nagas and those which are not Nagas can live up to an eon. Those which are not Nagas that can live for such a length of time would be those animals living with long life gods. So gods, with gods and with demigods. So there are animals that accompany or surround or live in that realm, but being animals, they of course not experiencing the pleasures of the gods, but they will have long lives, possibly up to an eon. So in brief, both Nagas and animals that live in the god realms.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
This is just a thing I think about when I reflect upon the animals. So I was just wondering if when we see animals, whether or not we're actually seeing a reflection of our own prior existence as animals. And that's why we're seeing an animal. We're seeing an animal as something that is a reflection of our own prior conditioning. And maybe, and therefore, use that as a means of regret as well.
So, but you're not saying that the only reason we can see animals is because we were born as animals before. What you're asking is, should we use this as a means of meditation? That I can observe this and I have been born as an animal before.
It's a more general comment about karma. When we see an event that's a suffering event, is that a reflection of our own prior actions in relation to other beings?
Okay.
So maybe we were animals and we caused them the suffering that we're seeing.
Okay.
Maybe we were other beings. Otherwise, why would we see these things?
Okay.
Don't 그랬어야 아니 하고 두 그랬어요. 그래 아저씨라 되고 맞네. 이제 동아 통투세나데 미 통야데 계시 말와 동아 수만도 삼로단다 하고 두고로 디 하고 두고로 두고로 디디디레다 하고 두디 냠뇨 토네 다 제산데시 수만데 저치 나메 예 진님이 두로 남시 장원을 차든 두 년만 키인 미 년만 키인자 다디 기통 두 그래서 디네데 말데 년만 키인민다 하고야 말 내가 저 년만 키인 받다 가서 하고 나도 하고 돼야 말와 네 그래서 이다 인생의 기용아 레베스네 용요래 기용아레베 용요래스 마다 인나게 말 용요아라 제가 뒤로 그냥 저 기용아 이제 기통 두 그래서 디자면 많이 이거 용마야 들어와다 용한테 먼저 용아래와다 디 용의 김전진 통투 그래서 디디 말이야 내가 저기 이다게 용아데 디 다딩아 지다 통투금도 와 진짜 년마 용의 김전 다도 통투야 말이야 이게봐요 말이야.
So part of what you said you certainly can and should use, recognizing I have suffered like this in the past. That's certainly to use. But the fact that one can observe such suffering or such beings is not dependent on us having been born in such a way or suffered in such a way. Certainly, since beginning this time, we will have suffered in every way that we are observing or can observe, as well as every life form we can observe, we are likely to have been born as. But it's not that because we are born in a particular way or have suffered in a certain way that we can observe it now. Because there are many life forms we can't observe, we can only understand through presentations such as these, but we can't observe them. But we would have been born in these ways in the past. So in this way, you can think about it in terms of, I have been born in this way, I have suffered like that. But just that far. So then let's conclude then. If there are more questions, we can continue this afternoon. Thank you.